Okay, we'll open the Ways and Means Committee hearing and call upon Senator Lang to introduce Senate Bill 189FN, an act relative to the deduction of gross business profits and determining taxable business profits. The prime sponsor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank members of the committee. So this bill was brought for a request of a constituent when an issue was brought to me. Originally, the way this works is in 2018, the federal tax code was changed so that interest can only be deducted out of the business level at 30% for the purposes of determining profits and determining taxation on those profits. What this bill seeks to do is go back to the way it was before, which allows us to deduct that a New Hampshire business who does a capital expenditure and has took a loan out for that capital expenditure is able to deduct 100% of the interest on that capital deduction for the purposes of manufacturing. And the reason why this is important is that this is mostly important to manufacturing or industries that have multiple states that they operate in. So I'm going to use a simple manufacturer of Freudenberg or Anheuser-Busch. Those are two that I can think of off the top of my head that have multiple manufacturing locations across the country, not just in New Hampshire. So in determining the cost of a widget that they're going to make, or a bottle of beer in the case of Anheuser-Busch, they evaluate it for manufacturing purposes where it's most cost effective to do this, to create that widget. So if you have a business that wants to, here in New Hampshire, a manufacturing business that wants to do a capital expenditure that'll ultimately cut down their, say, energy expense. They want to do a huge energy savings project and the capital expenditure. They're going to put in a biomass plant to heat the plant. They're going to put in LED lighting and they're going to do installation, and then they take a capital expenditure for that. Currently, the way it would work is the interest on that expenditure to improve the plant would they'd only be deduct 30% of the interest off their profits. So at the end of the day, they make X number of dollars. They'd take only 30% of that interest and apply it to the profits to reduce profits on the business profits tax, and they would be subject to it. What this bill will allow them to do to take is 100% of that improvement, interest only, and apply it against their business profits. It's money they spent to improve the project, improve the plant, and keep manufacturing here in New Hampshire. It allowed them to deduct that from their business profits tax, and they would thus have a smaller tax liability. We can't figure out exactly what that tax reduction is, but again, it's a limited basis reduction, and I think it's clear that interest on a loan is a business expense and money you spend on a loan shouldn't be taxed. So this bill seeks to clean that up and make it so that our manufacturers in New Hampshire can be more competitive with other states in these multi-state, and for businesses that are here, I'd much rather them consider improving their plant rather than move out of state. So it helps that as well. So there's some people here that are willing to speak on it. I'm not an expert by any stretch of the imagination on tax code, and they'll probably be better off answering than I will. So I'd like to hold questions for them.
Any questions for Senator Lang? If not, thank you very much for your testimony. I think we'll take Dave Gervais before the Revenue Administration, because I'm sure the questions for Revenue Administration will be a bit longer and more intense. So Dave Gervais is speaking in favor of the bill and representing the BIA.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that, although I'm not sure I wouldn't have preferred to hear DRA first, too. I'll keep my testimony very short. BIA is here in favor of this bill. I think the most important concept to understand about this issue is the things that happened at the federal level as a part of that federal tax reform in 2017. There were parts of that were very beneficial to businesses, and there were parts of it that were less beneficial to businesses, and they were there by design to help balance out the fiscal impact of that tax reform. The beneficial parts of that federal tax reform does not flow down to the state level. But because we're in conformity on this issue, the not beneficial parts of it do flow down to the state level. So this is, as Senator Lang correctly stated, this is really intended with this very narrow issue to go back to the way it was within the, pre-2017 in New Hampshire, where businesses could deduct 100% of that interest expense. That's all the testimony I have. I hope you will act favorably on the bill. I would be happy to answer questions, although like Senator Lang, I don't.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Mr. Gervais? If not, thank you very much for your testimony. I think we have two people from the Revenue Administration. Well, why don't we have them both come up together and give us the scoop? And for the record, state your name.
Fred Goldbroth, Director of Audit, New Hampshire DRA.
Good morning. My name is Keen Meng Wong, Tax Policy Counsel at the DRA.
Thank you.
The department does not have a position on this bill. The department did prepare a fiscal note on this bill, and I have the fiscal note quick guide that I'll just hand out.
Good. Now, is this in addition to the fiscal note that we have with the bill, or does it replace the fiscal note?
This is not in addition to the fiscal. This is not an amended fiscal note. This is the original fiscal note that we prepared. Plus, it's like a summary of the fiscal note that we prepared. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Could you speak into the microphone? It's a little difficult to hear you.
It's not an amended fiscal note. It's a summary of the fiscal note that we prepared for the
Good.
for the bill.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Okay. So when we were preparing this bill, we were not able to determine the a monetary fiscal impact on the bill because we do not have that information to determine the business interest deductions that would be taken by the taxpayers. But to the extent that that this bill passes, it would essentially accelerate the claim of the deduction from spread out over the years to the year of incurring the business interest deduction, which is and this is effective for 24 onwards. So in that sense, we'll see that impact happening in that particular year. So the impact to the revenues would be that decrease in that particular year of incurring, whereas in the future years, if the taxpayers do not incur a business interest deduction, there won't be a deduction in those years.
I didn't get that. Okay.
Can you please really speak in?
Yeah. It'd be very helpful. Very helpful. Thank you.
When the DRA prepared the fiscal note, we were not able to provide a numerical number on the impact on this bill, simply because we were not able to determine the business interest deduction taken by each taxpayer. Our system just is not equipped to pull that data out from all the returns that's been submitted. But to the effect that this bill essentially accelerates the claim of the business interest to the year that the business interest was incurred, as opposed to allowing a cap and then having that carry over to next year. So the deduction would be taken in that full year one, reducing the revenues for that particular year.
Okay. So in the fiscal note, it states that as a result, the department assumes this deduction applies only to business interest expense incurred in the tax years commencing on or after January 1st, 2024.
Yes, because the impact is for tax year 2024 onwards. the full amount of the business interest expense incurred in that year will be claimed fully.
Okay, so the bill allowing for the deduction becomes operative for the taxpayer on or after January 1st, 2024. Is that clear?
Yeah,
Okay, so to everyone around the table, think of that kind of looking forward a little bit in terms of the impact, correct? Is our man who's going to give us the impact.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, I think that's an important point at this point in time, as it would affect our revenues. Yeah, in 25. Good. Okay, great, yes.
Thank you. So again, if, from our conversation we had a little bit earlier on this bill, again, businesses can deduct 100%. The problem is it takes 4 years to get there, right? 30%, 30%, 30%, then 10% at the end. So they're ultimately getting this deduction. The problem is our credit carry forward, right? That puts us at risk every year rather than taking the deduction in the first year. So the question is, do you want your pain spread out over 4 years for the reduction, or do you want to just take it in the first year and be done? And then we don't have a liability going forward, because right now we don't know what that projection is going to look like. And so if I understand that we were talking, this actually cleans up and protects the state a little bit from this carry forward issue that we have. We have a huge liability on credit carry forwards and other things. This will help us a little bit in protecting us from those carry forwards.
just a slight clarification on that. The credit carry forward issue that I believe Senator Lang is referring to is the amount of money that the state is holding from the payments that's been made, actual cash payments that's been made from the tax.
I used the wrong phrase, but
Yeah.
I meant the carry forward of this debt, this interest charge.
Yes, right, exactly. So yes, what Senator Lang mentioned is accurate. Right now, the cap is on a particular year, but it allows, this current statute allows for the excess to be carried over to the next year, and then you look at the 30% again next year, and then if it's below the 30%, then the taxpayer will be able to claim that deduction. So it's on an ongoing basis, whereas this bill actually allows it to all accelerate to the first year.
Okay.
Yep.
Senator Rosenwald has a question.
I have a few questions,
Yes,
if I
sure.
could.
Of course.
As I understand this provision, it only applies to businesses that have under $27 million of gross receipts. How many filers in New Hampshire is that have less than 27 million of gross receipts?
That is accurate. In terms of the application of this 30% cap, and that's based on the federal statute.
I'm sorry, I can't hear.
Hmm.
I couldn't hear
If you turn
that.
your microphone off, it turns into a speaker so you can hear him when he speaks.
And that's accurate in terms of the application on the 30% cap. I believe it's adjusted from, initially I think it was 25 million, and then I believe now it's 27 million taxpayers for an amount of gross business income. I can't remember the specific threshold amount that amount relates to. In terms of taxpayers in New Hampshire, exceeding that amount, I believe we have not made that analysis, but I can go back to look into that and provide that information to the committee.
Okay.
Thank you. I think, isn't it under 27 million or is it over 27 million? I think it would be helpful for us to
Yep.
have good data
Sure.
to
Yes.
make a decision on. I had asked you before we started, but let me ask in the public hearing. I know some other states have done this. I think I can understand why businesses think it would be helpful, but I think it would be helpful to us if we had some sense of the impact this maybe would be. How many zeros do we look at in terms of a revenue impact? I mean, is it hundreds of thousands of dollars or tens of millions? I have no idea, but I think it would just be helpful for us to have some good data. So if you can ask other states or professional organizations, somebody must have a sense. And my other question is, are there other provisions of the Tax Cut and Jobs Act conformity that the department has already, that we've already decoupled, or that the department is looking at decoupling? Is there anything else out there?
The department is currently not looking to decouple from any other provisions of the TCJA unless there's a legislative passage of any legislative bills that requires a decouple.
Further question? I think when we heard this bill in Ways and Means initially, when we made this decision a couple of years ago, or two terms ago, there was a statement that it would be indeterminable at that point in time as to whether this would have a positive or negative effect. All right, is that still the case? Are we working on that? Because in answer to Senator Rosenwald's question, it would be very important for us to have a definitive answer as to whether this is a plus or a minus decoupling.
My apologies. I wasn't aware of the hearing two sessions ago, so I can't really speak to that. But I would refer you back to the fiscal note that we prepared, saying that it would actually accelerate it potentially could be a timing concern in terms of revenue recognition, where if as the example provided by Senator Lang, if the deduction is taken over 4 years versus the deduction taken in the year one itself.
Okay. At the time of that hearing, which was a couple of bienniums ago, Chris Sullivan at that time made the presentation with regard to the effect of this. Now Chris is gone; he's left it. He was part of a group that was studying this. We had a committee that looked at this, Senator Bertzel's committee. So we ought to go back and look at those minutes just to find out what was going on. So go ahead, please. Do you have questions,
Yeah.
Senator?
So I guess I want to be clear and make sure I understand, because my interpretation of this bill was that actually ultimately in a given span over 4 years, it's a net zero to the state, right? Either way, we're taking the deduction. The question is only whether we want to take it in the first year or take it over 4 years. But the same amount of revenue is collected over those years, because if I don't have it in the second year, then I'm going to pay 100% of my profits. I have no deduction to take off my business profits. Is that correct?
Yes, that will be the model. It would be barring everything else remaining equal.
Right.
Yeah.
Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you. But that assumes that a business doesn't take on any other expense that incurs interest.
Exactly, barring everything else remaining equal. I mean, we
Right,
can't.
so there might be a cumulative impact if, I mean, do we assume businesses only invest once every 4 years? Or constantly?
That is something that the DRA would not be able to answer, what a business will and will not do. We can provide that, okay, this is the analysis that we can provide in terms, so I
course.
think that's a policy concern.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay. Anyone else have any? Please proceed.
Okay. Oh, and there's
Take
this,
us to the next step.
there's just this one point in terms of the carried over business interest that was not deducted in prior to 2024, potentially, being able to be deducted in the after 2024 under the current language of the bill. That carryover is not allowed as a deduction, so potentially some taxpayers might be harmed with that. And we probably could, if the intention of the bill is to allow that deduction, we can probably work with the committee to draft language to propose that.
Okay. How about, nothing? But you're substantiating everything that he has said. Okay. Further questions from the committee? Understanding that, this change was made a couple of years ago, the idea to go forward with this. And over a period of time, Norm Major has had some serious concerns about credit carry forwards and where we stand with regard to the enormity of the amount of credit that's still out there that has not been taken. Where does that fit in this scheme? How is that affected? How can they take that, or when can they take that? You said on a percentage basis over a period of time or all at once?
So currently, under current statute, the credit carryover concern, I believe, is being addressed with the limitation to taxpayers having to keep amount of credit carryover up to 500% of their taxable income. I believe this is for tax year. Hang on.
So, Mr. Chair, while he's looking that up, I do know that we have a provision that'll slowly dwindle that down from 500% carryover to 250 down to 100%, so that the state doesn't have a liability hanging over its head that is unreasonable. So I do know that. I'm not sure what the timeline is for that drawdown, but we'll be writing checks back to taxpayers that have paid too much, and the state's been holding it. We'll be writing checks back to those taxpayers to get that credit carryover down.
Exactly. That's what I was trying to get to. Is the 500% is the total 500% of the total tax liability for taxable periods ending on or after December 31, 22, and then that goes down to 250% for tax years ending on or after 25, and then 100% for December 31, 2027. In terms of whether the state will be writing checks in terms of refunds, it depends on, once again, this depends on taxpayers being aware of the situation, and they may not be paying that much in their estimated tax payments, taking into account that they know that there's this amount of credit with the state, and therefore utilizing that credit for estimated tax payments, reducing our need to issue a check in that sense. So it all depends on taxpayer behavior, which is something that we are not able to predict.
Okay. Is anything else you want to present to us vis-a-vis this bill?
I think that's all that we have.
Okay. Are there any questions from any members of the committee? Yes. Right, the number of filers
And,
that fall into that category.
right, and as far as you can determine what the experience in other states has been.
Good. Okay. If there are no questions, I thank you very much for your testimony. Appreciate it. And you will get back to us
Yes.
with the answers to Senator Rosenwald's questions.
Yep.
Great. Appreciate that very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair. So I do have an amendment coming for this bill. The issue identified by them about the, I didn't mean to orphan people prior to 24 that had interest credit carryover that they wanted to use. And so the amendment fixes that, so I don't strand those taxpayers.
Okay.
And we'll have that amendment today, so.
Okay, so there will be an amendment forthcoming. Have you seen the amendment?
No, we'll probably be providing the proposed language to Senator Lang.
Senator Lang will provide you with the amendment, and if you have any comments with regard to the amendment, we would appreciate that you would come back and make them to us so that we could make an informed decision.
Yes, for sure.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Appreciate it very much. No one else has signed up to speak for or against the bill. Is there anyone out there who would like to speak for or against Senate Bill 189? And if you haven't seen the amendment will be forthcoming. And I don't think the chair will take any action till we've seen the amendment and he's brought it forward.
Correct. We'll have the amendment today. We'll have it actually, hopefully in the next 10 minutes, but so we can look at it. So,
Okay, great, thank you. If there's no one else that wishes to testify, I'll declare the hearing closed on Senate Bill 189. And we're on time. All right. Okay, we'll open the hearing on Senate Bill 260FN, an act relative to deductions under the business profits tax for compensation of members and owners, and call upon the prime sponsor, Senator Lang.
thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, this bill was brought forward based on a conversation with a constituent. I'm going to take you through just a little bit of business laws. I understand it, or how taxes work in various businesses. If you own, there are certain businesses in our state that are professional businesses. So lawyers' offices, doctors' offices, dentists' offices, CPAs. You have to be a lawyer. You have to be a doctor. I can't open a medical practice and hire doctors to work for me. I have to be a doctor in order to have them work for me. So those professional corporations or professional limited liability corporations are broken down into generally members. Owner members. If you're an LLC, you have a member or owner, and then you have W-2 employees that may work for you. So I'm going to use a dental practice as an example in this conversation. So in a dental practice, you could have a situation where you may have 3 dentists that own an office, and they have 3 dentists that work for them as W-2 employees. So there's 3 member owners and 3 W-2 employees that work for a given practice. In that practice, they'll set, if you're a salaried employee or if you're a W-2 employee, you get a salary that's set, and you get your regular weekly payments. And at the end of the year, they look at your productivity, and in healthcare, they use a thing called an RVU, a relative value unit, and they'll determine how many RVUs you did, how much profitability was made for the company, and they'll give you a bonus. And if you're a W-2 employee, your compensation is the combination of both your salary and your bonus. However, if you're an owner or a member, that has a little different language associated with it. If you're an owner, you get a draw, which is the equivalent of the salary, if you're a W-2 employee, and then you get a disbursement, is the language that's used. The headache or problem that I found, and I had a conversation with DRA, and I'll talk to you about that in a second, is that sometimes when a member takes a disbursement, they're considering that a disbursement of profits instead of compensation, and therefore they tax it at 8.5% as part of business profits tax. And yet, if you look at the industry as a whole and you say, hey, if I have a dentist and my base salary is $250,000 and I give him a $250,000 bonus because of his work structure, and I'm an owner and I take a $250,000 draw, and I take a $250,000 disbursement, that second $250,000 is being taxed at 8.5% on occasion. When I asked DRA about this, the word I got was, well, that generally doesn't happen. I want to make sure it never happens, right? The idea behind fair compensation is fair compensation. Whether you're an owner or you're an employee, what this bill would require DRA to do is understand what fair compensation is and be able to make sure they tax accordingly and tax fairly. An owner who happens to be also being an employee who takes a draw and a disbursement should not be taxed business profits tax on this disbursement. He's just like the regular W-2 employee that should only be subject to his federal taxes, not state taxes, for that compensation. That's what this bill seeks to do, is just clarify that issue to make sure that, in fact, DRA understands that a disbursement can, a reasonable disbursement is compensation for the owner, not a taxable profits disbursement. That's it. That's the bill.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you for your comments. Questions? Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you. I'll probably ask this of DRA as well. As I understand this law, and I have to tell you that I spent like an hour on the phone Sunday with a tax guy in Nashua. Yeah. The current law requires a natural person to deliver a personal service. the way this bill is drafted, Roman 20 would remove that requirement, so it would allow corporations to be partners and still claim a deduction for personal services. Was that your intent?
I'm sorry, I don't follow your question. I'm not sure I'm
I'll
right.
ask it of DRA,
Okay, thank you.
DRA, but this was brought up to me by this big
So again,
tax guy.
We're talking about fair, reasonable, and customary compensation, right? So again, it's what an individual, if you're an owner, takes as compensation as compared to a profits disbursement. So I think there's a delineation, a more clear delineation by talking about that and making sure that DRA is looking at what's compensation and what's profits disbursement. Those are two different things that can occur, especially if you're
Right.
if you're an employee, right? So again, if I'm a dentist and I'm an active dentist working and I take a fair compensation reasonable to my other dentists in my practice, I shouldn't be penalized by paying business profits on the second half of my compensation package.
So if I
Further
could
questions?
follow up, I think it has to do with the words owners, because the owners could become corporations and no longer have to be natural persons delivering a personal service. So you could have, Dental Corporation of America acquire the practice, and the way this is currently drafted, take that deduction, which is a big change in the current law beyond
I'll let
just,
DRA answer that question. I
Yeah.
guess that's not my
I'm
understanding.
going to ask them. Thank you.
Any other questions for Senator Lang? If you're Senator, thank you very much. You're bringing a volume of paper to us. Thank you. Gentlemen of the jury, you're back.
For DRA,
Kim Meng Wong, Tax Policy Council, DRA. When on Senate Bill 260, the DRA did prepare a fiscal note, and as with the prior bill, the DRA does not have a position on this bill, and we'll just hand out the fiscal note quick
Great,
guide.
thank you. Let's pass them out. Thank you. Jim, thank you for coming, and please, let's hear your take on the legislation, because I'm interested in one aspect of the first fiscal note, that there may be a double deduction for a C corporation. And will you address that in your testimony?
Sure.
Thank you.
Hang on. So specifically, the language on,
Speak into the microphone, please.
yes,
We've got to hear you.
specifically, the language on the bill allows for a deduction of the personal compensation for all business organizations. Currently, so a C Corp is also a business organization in itself. And it is currently on the federal level is taking it's allowed a deduction on on compensation, and that flows down to the taxable income that then flows into the New Hampshire calculation of the New Hampshire taxable income. And so that deduction there in itself is already taken at that level. And then this bill could potentially allow for another deduction at the New Hampshire level, because it's a deduction against the business income.
Questions from members of the committee? No questions, Senator Oswald?
You. Let me try to restate the question that I asked Senator Lang. This Roman 20 seems to remove the requirement that these personal services be delivered by a natural person and open it up to a corporation to take a deduction for delivering personal services. Does the department agree that that's a significant change?
I believe there are two items here to note, that the new bill is in addition to what is currently available on the statute right now. Current BPT statutes do allow a deduction for personal compensation, and this Roman 20 is a new bill. It doesn't replace the current bill, the current statute on personal comp deduction. And to the issue on whether, as you mentioned earlier, Senator, that this is a deduction for fair, reasonable, and customary compensation for members and owners of a business organization. And then I think your point is that members and owners of a business organization could be corporations and not necessarily individuals. But then the language in terms of saying that it's compensation most likely would point towards services, personal services from individuals, as opposed to services rendered by a corporation. Maybe if that could cause confusion, maybe added language to define that could clean that up.
Thank you. Could I
Other
continue?
questions?
Thank you.
Sure.
I was interested in the statement in the department's fiscal analysis that the language as currently drafted could set up an impermissible division of taxpayers who are subject to the interest and dividend tax and those who are not. Could you elaborate on that, please?
Right. So this deduction is only as here in deduction for compensation members. Right. So it is in lines 3 and 4 of the bill, which is Roman 20, a deduction of the full amount of fair, reasonable, and customary compensation for members and owners of business organizations subject to taxation under RSA 77. RSA 77 is the interest and dividends tax statute, and this Roman 20 only allows for the deduction for business organizations whose members that the reasonable and customary compensation is paid to those members that are subject to the IND, whereas potentially if there are compensation paid to members who are not subject to the IND, potentially it could be maybe residents, individuals who are not residents of New Hampshire, they're not subject to the IND. So the business organization itself, we're talking about the business organizations, not about the members. We're talking about the business organization, whether they can make this additional deduction or not. So the business organizations that have members who are not subject to the IND will not get the benefit of this deduction. So potentially it could be a impermissible classification of taxpayers. We haven't done constitutional analysis on that. Potentially, maybe the DOJ might provide a better analysis.
Sure, further questions?
If I could.
Of course.
Roman 20 is silent on whether this deduction could create a loss. Could you talk about the potential for that happening and what would be the role rollover effects of that.
Right. The current statute, the personal comp deduction statute on the current BPT statutes do have limitations on that in the sense that it would not allow a deduction that would create a loss for the taxpayer. And this Roman 20 does not have that that provision. So potentially, if the compensation is more than the income amount, then it would result in a loss on the New Hampshire side. The impacts of that potentially could be net operating loss carryover, creation of net operating losses.
Okay, further question? Are you all set, Senator? Okay, good, thank you. Any further questions? Just when, in your fiscal note, you say that the DRA recommends that the proposed legislation be reviewed by a constitutional lawyer of the Department of Justice. Are you in essence inferring the constitutionality is questionable at this point in time?
It is that issue that I was answering to Senator Rosenwald. We haven't, as I said, we didn't perform a detailed constitutional review on that. I think probably a constitutional attorney or the DOJ would be more equipped to do that analysis.
Okay, just want to make it clear on the amended fiscal note, of the new fiscal note that we have. There is a suggestion by DRA that we ask the Department of Justice to comment on the constitutionality of this piece of legislation, which is, appreciate that. We appreciate those comments. Are there any other questions to the lake?
Mr. Chair, I think I can clean that up. I think the problem was a drafting error, and that the real in section 20 should be -A, which is the business profits tax provision, not -77, which is IND. So the intention was not to invoke the IND tax. The intention was strictly to invoke the business profits tax. And so so there was a drafting error. They missed the -A in 20, which if you look under if you look in the RSA, 77-A is the business profits tax. And that's why if you look at the second half of the bill, section 15, where we give rulemaking authority, we talk about rulemaking authority as it relates to the business profits tax in RSA 77-A:4. So again, the intention was, I think this was just simple drafting error in that it's -A, and to make subject 20 subject to business profits tax.
Right, so that would have to be cleaned up by an amendment.
So are you drafting
Yes.
that? Or
Is
someone,
drafting that?
I'm gonna,
Or
I will
going
have a
to-
physical amendment again. It would just, I didn't catch it until he just said it and you just brought it up and we saw the additional note. But again, I think we can do that as a simple drafting, a simple amendment here in the committee and put the -A on to make sure it's clear that this applies to the business profits tax, not the IND tax.
Okay. But are there any further questions for the Revenue Administration? If not, thank you very much for your testimony. Is there anything you guys want to add before you leave?
There's nothing additional for me to add, but probably if it would be best to look at this Roman 20 in conjunction with the current bill, with the current statute that allows for personal comp deduction, and if it could be, if there's any kind of deficiency that is in that current statute right now, maybe work on that as opposed to a different section or a different paragraph making reference to personal comp deduction. It seems to us, it looks like a duplication of the current statute, however, with some nuanced differences that might, having two different paragraphs talking about a similar item might cause some confusion in terms of the application of that.
Okay. So would the statement made by Senator Lang satisfy you that the constitutional question doesn't exist when these changes are made? Or is there still a conflict?
As to the applicants, it obviates that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think likely it would resolve the issue.
Okay. Okay. And Senator Lang, you have an amendment forthcoming?
Well, I just found out about it, but if we exec today, I will make a recommendation for it to amend the bill to include the dash A, because again, if you look in line one of the bill, we are talking about 77-A4, right? So it's
Right.
just a typo. I think in OLS, they just missed the dash A, but I will make that, when we exec the bill today, if we exec the bill today, I will make the motion to add that dash A into language.
Okay, great. Right,
With the tax guy in Nashua, if I could, if there's no rush.
right. Okay. Any further comments that you guys want to make?
No, yeah, that's it for
Okay.
us.
All right. Good.
Thank you.
If not, thank you very much for your testimony. Thanks for coming. There isn't anyone else signed up for or against. Is there anyone who wishes to speak for or against Senate Bill 260 FN? If not, we will close the hearing on Senate Bill 260 FN. Thank you.
So members of the committee, we're going to take a 10-minute recess, and then we're going to come back and talk about executing some bills. We have 5 bills that are, that we have left that we have not exec, that's been delivered to our committee, we've heard public hearings on. We'll start talking about what we're going to exec and what we're not.
Great.
Up to you guys.
Let's go.
I think she has one right there, and I'm not sure which one you have. Okay, so 189 we have, and I'm going to do a verbal amendment on, and we have an amendment for 104, which you have submitted already, and I'll do a verbal amendment on 260 to correct the typo.
Yes.
motion to go into executive.
So moved.
It's been moved by Senator Lang, seconded by Senator Murphy to go into executive session. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Great. All those opposed? Ayes have it. We are now in executive session. I'd like to take up, I'm going to take up Senate Bill 104 first. I'm going down to the list. All right, thank you. We'll take up Senate Bill 104. In front of you, you have an amendment number 366S. And I'm going to move that amendment. And get a second, I'll talk about what the amendment does. Can I have a second on, I move adoption of amendment number 366S on Senate Bill 104. And seconded by Senator D'Alessandro. This amendment was a cooperative effort. I worked with the community college system. They had some concerns over the way the bill was worded and the number of students that it was applicable to. They wanted to broaden that scope of the scholarship would be applicable to. So working with the school, we drafted new language relative to the first section of this that talks about the community college scholarship program and fund. One of the things we did was we expanded the money coverage to do things like fees and books. Which generally things like a Pell Grant don't cover, and other scholarships generally don't cover fees and books. And the idea being, I'm going to use nursing as an example. If you take a nursing class and it's got a $400 lab fee, that may be a barrier from somebody to take that class and become a nurse because they can't afford the $400 lab fee that's out of pocket. And especially considering there's still means testing in here. And so we cleaned up the language to allow books and fees to be part of the scholarship fund reimbursement or coverage. On the online gaming part, there was a cut and paste error from OLS. It left out the entire RFP process on how we figure out which vendors we have. And so that language was brought in here and clean. There was also a concern by Lottery brought up that this would accidentally allow slot machines. And so the electronic machines were the language was put in here to take out that, to make it so that it was clear that slot machines, HHR, those electronic machines that you play in a brick and mortar location would not be included. This would allow basically the table games, poker, blackjack, roulette, those kind of table games would be allowed through the online process. Other than that, I'm happy to answer any questions about the amendment. If you have any, I think it was emailed out to everybody earlier and we have hard copies now. Yes, Senator.
You mentioned in a previous discussion that on page 4, line 28, you were going to modify that?
So I believe if we adopt this amendment, there's going to be an amendment to the, and it'll be a motion by Representative Murphy to strike that one sentence.
Okay.
But we have to adopt the amendment first for it to be the current language that we're talking about.
Okay.
Any further discussion on adoption of amendment number, back to the first page, 366S? Seeing none, all those in favor of adopting amendment number 366S signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Ayes have it, and the current amendment is adopted and open to further amendment. Representative Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, on page 4, line 28, the sentence, no more than 3 online gaming agents shall be in operation at any given time. I've got a real difficulty with any legislation that caps arbitrarily any marketplace. And so I would move that we amend the bill further by striking that sentence.
And I'll second that recommendation. Okay. So the motion on the floor is to amend the language of the bill to strike under 287-J4 the sentence that says no more than 3 online gaming agents will be in operation at any time.
Further, if I may just say, I should have said it earlier, I did speak to Mr. McIntyre, and he did not have any objection to this change.
Just a question of Senator Murphy. Senator Murphy, with this line gone, how then would agents be selected? Would there be an RFP process? You go through the RFP process and there'd be a decision by the commissioners and so forth to make that happen?
That's, in short, the answer is yes, sir. There is an RFP process contained in the bill.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
Any further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment of Sen Murphy to strike that one line, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. One nay, 4-1, the amendment is adopted. I'll make the motion of OTPA with amendment number 366S as amended by Sen Murphy, or OTPA. And it's seconded by Sen Murphy. Any further discussion on the passage of Senate Bill 104 as amended?
Thank you. I'll be voting no on this motion. When you introduced the bill at the public hearing, you were really eloquent on the importance of our workforce, particularly our healthcare workforce, and I am in complete agreement on that. But I think it is a sad indictment on us if we make the ability of that workforce to become educated and work here be dependent on somebody's entertainment. I'm just not comfortable with the community college part of this bill, so I will be voting no.
So Senator, I guess I have a question. So if y'all have this piece of paper was put, I asked the community college system to give me a list of all the different types of programs that are available through the community college system. Again, the purpose of this bill was to allow for an educated workforce and to allow that to happen. But again, we can't do that in blind. We have to have a funding source. Right. So I don't know what that funding source would be if we took away the online gaming, because I don't think we'd allocate $30 million and get that through finance. This becomes basically a net zero cost to the state, right? So we're creating a revenue, and we're spending the money on that revenue for the best interest of the citizens of New Hampshire to provide all these new entry-level workforce, LNAs and coding, people in coding and all kinds of different industries in New Hampshire. So I guess I struggle with, I like the idea, I understand, I wouldn't necessarily like to tie iGaming either, but I also want a funding mechanism so I'm not throwing out a $30 million ask for the finance.
Well, let me just say, you'd be the only person in the Senate not throwing that ask for something at finance, because yesterday, I think we heard, I don't know, $60 million in appropriation requests. I just think if we are, as a state, committed to developing the healthcare workforce, I think there are better, more predictable, other ways that I think we can do it.
I would add that we get a lot of revenue from people's pleasure, whether it's alcohol or dining out. A lot of our revenue streams are based on this very sort of activity. Is it ideal? Maybe, maybe not. We can discuss that. But the fact is, we do this a lot. It's nothing really that new, I don't think.
If I could, we do it a lot, but our biggest source for funding education is the business taxes, not alcohol, not
I understand.
other things, not lottery. So
Yes.
it's just a philosophical
Okay.
tenet for me. I just don't think it's the right way to commit to our state's workforce.
I get it. There are people against sin taxes.
Yes.
So any further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor of auto pass as amended on Senate Bill 104 FNA signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. On a 4-1, the bill passes. I'll pick it out.
You should.
I probably take this one out, so I'll take this one out.
Okay.
Next up, let's jump to Senate Bill 261 relative to the interest and dividends and threshold tax. I'll make a motion of ITL on
Second.
261.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded ITL on Senate Bill 261, to remind members, this was a bill that was looking to repeal the repeal of the interest dividends tax, set the rate at 4%, and then increase thresholds. And while I wholeheartedly love the second half of the bill, I truly just the opposite, don't like the first half of the bill. I think we have, I think it's a reasonable tax deduction that was put in last year and well thought out, and I'm not looking to reinstate it at all.
So it was a messy bill. Yeah.
Senator Roosevelt.
Thank you. I'll be voting no on this. The interest and dividends tax is paid by less than 10% of the people in New Hampshire. I think most people that I run across in my district don't even know it's there. And when you look at the pyramid of how much is paid on that tax by how many people, we're really talking about 15 different filers who have assets of over $300 million and are paying $600,000 a year in that tax alone. But I think we can help the 10% of people who are paying it better and not hurt state revenues, and then biennium following the next one by increasing the threshold but halting the repeal.
Mr. Chairman, I too will be voting against the inexpedience legislation. The elimination of the tax, as Senator Roosevelt has pointed out, takes care of the wealthiest of people. I mean, you talk about the differentiation in the structure of our society. The have-nots are getting screwed, and the haves are getting an enormous chunk of change, an enormous chunk of change. And the tax has been in place since the 1930s. You don't hear a lot of negative about the tax. The only people that come and testify are the mega millionaires who really are going to be the beneficiaries of the reduction and the elimination of the tax. We're talking about a fairness issue, and we've done a couple of things that I think are just not consistent with good tax policy and fairness. So I'll speak against this on the floor, and I just think here we have reasonable solution. I mean, $50,000 deduction. If that isn't enough, I don't know what is. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Again, I'd say, even if it is only 10%, they're all New Hampshire citizens and all subject to fair taxes. And so again, I think that there was well thought out plan last year when the interest dividends tax plan was put together for the phase out. And remember, we're sitting in a surplus category. So why are we collecting taxes on money that we already have a surplus for? We have, if I remember right, over $200 million, $250 million, 7 months in for this year. We have $200 million left over from last year that we didn't spend. And so the purpose of just collecting taxes for the purposes of collecting taxes, I think, is inappropriate. And we treat all citizens the same. And this is a case we can make 100% of New Hampshire citizens not have to pay an income tax.
Yes.
It's a debatable issue. I'd like to say to you, take a look at House Bill 2 and take a look at the suspensions that were in that piece of legislation, the suspension of elderly foster grandparents, the suspension of giving aid to people, the needy people, home care, health care services, the suspension of revenue sharing. Don't the people deserve to get a portion of the surplus revenue that we're producing when we promised them in 1968, when we eliminated the inventory tax and we created the business profits tax, that they would receive a share? That's been suspended biennium after biennium after biennium. So if you want to be, I think, decent and fair, we ought to pay what we owe the communities. We owe them $25 billion a year. That's the share. That's been suspended year after year after year. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, the motion on the floor is ITL on Senate Bill 261. All those in favor of ITL signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
No.
On a 3-2, the motion carries. ITL will be the committee recommendation. Next, we'll go to Senate Bill 262L, allowing municipalities. I'm sorry?
We'll take it.
Senator Murphy will take it out. Senate Bill 262L, allowing municipalities to collect an occupation fee from operators of local rooms. I'd entertain a motion. Senator Innes?
I vote inexpedient or move inexpedient to legislate.
So moved ITL by Senator Innes. Is there a second? Second by Senator Murphy. I think we all remember this was the $2 tourism tax that municipalities wanted on local rooms, or up to $2. I just leave. I don't know if there's any other conversation on that, but
Well, the conversation is, this has been brought up over and over again, biennium after biennium after biennium. We talk about local control, and we don't give local control to the locals. They're building all of these apartments, they're building all of these developments, hotels. I mean, if you look at the scene, the hotels just keep growing and growing and growing, and the services that are equated with that, fire, police, all of these have to be paid for. And this simple addition helps to do that. It seems to me it's a perfect example, and they have to vote on it at the local level. The local level, it's going to take a vote of the people to do this. And to me, that's very consistent with good government. Ask the people to vote. We deny them. And we deny them over and over and over again. I think this goes back to the parking fee, how we won't let communities assess that parking fee that allows them to repair the parking garages. We do it in Manchester. We have that right, and we assess that fee, and we use it to repair the parking garage. We wouldn't let Concord do it to fix their parking garage. And lo and behold, our parking garage on Store Street is going to collapse. I wonder how many people are going to die when that collapse takes place. So, I think we're a little inconsistent in how we do things.
thank you, Senator. Senator Innes.
I think looking at this, these municipalities are already getting a large amount of revenue from hotel operations, let's say. They get the property tax on the property. Every time a new one goes up, the property tax revenue goes up. They also are getting an increased share of the rooms and meals revenue coming from the state. So my position is that the municipalities are doing just fine with this, and adding another tax, which is what this is just a nose under the tent that will lead to an increase in this tax over time and something that simply runs out of control. Again, I would make the case the municipalities are already benefiting significantly from these operations in their communities. And while I appreciate the senator's point of view, and I do, I just think the communities are being well supported.
Well, I appreciate your point of view in this context. If we're going to do that, then why don't we pay them revenue sharing, which we promised them
So this is
in 1968?
It's a different
different conversation. You're welcome to put that bill in, Senator.
It just takes a tweak of the budget.
You're welcome to put that bill in.
Just take
I guess
a little change in House Bill 2.
one of the biggest turning points for me was when I had talked to the Portsmouth mayor, right? We increased revenue sharing last year, and we gave Portsmouth $700,000 more a year, $1.3 million in new revenue. And when I asked what they did with it, it was, it just went into the general fund, right? So we gave them a chance for more revenue, and they didn't do anything with their new revenue to say, hey, we're going to earmark this for tourism and to help with tourism dollars or whatever was going on, which is what this bill would do, right? Now they need more money again. And so had they if the mayor of Portsmouth had been more and said, hey, this is what we did with the money, right, to help tourism, to help cover our expenses, or if even the prime sponsor, when I asked her how much her town, when she was talking about Hampton Beach, right? How much new money, they didn't know. The sponsor didn't know. The fact we gave them new money this year. And again, now they're looking to do more taxation, right? And without using the money we gave them, it was directly tourism driven. And they didn't, for lack, I'm going to get beat up for this. They didn't spend it wisely in the way they wanted, right? They spent it, is a better way of saying it. So again, I'm not looking to add anything that makes tourism in New Hampshire more expensive, right? We want New Hampshire's tourism to be cheap, to get more people to come, to drive up our rooms and meals tax, which will feed our revenue streams even more. So I'm not interested at all adding any new tourism tax to the state of New Hampshire, or even giving the town the opportunity to add a new tourism tax to their individual community. I think that that's irresponsible as a state.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if I may, I just would also say that I'm a little wary of the precedent that we'd be setting with this.
That's the thing.
The idea that a town, we're not a home rule state. We believe in local control, but we're not a home rule state. And the idea that a town or a city can begin to assess an additional tax on meals or rooms with, cigarette tax,
Sales tax,
alcohol tax,
table tax in restaurants.
Yeah, it would cascade. And we need transparency, consistency between towns and cities for all the people who visit us. And a maze of different tax structures would be very challenging.
Absolutely.
So I support the ITL.
Any further discussion? Hearing on all in favor of ITL on Senate Bill 262L, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay.
No,
Were you and I? So on a 4-1.
That's awesome.
I consider every bill on its own merits.
Thank you very much.
That's good.
We have 2 more bills on the table. I'm going to take up 189. We have an amendment for 189 that was presented. This amendment was reviewed by DRA, it's amendment number 426S. I had DRA take a look at it, and this solves the problem I had, right, accidentally orphaned previous taxpayers. So taxpayers that are already taking advantage of they only took 30% last year, and this year they're entitled to 30%. By my original bill, I would have orphaned them and said, no, you can't take any more deductions on your interest charges. It will, this makes it so they can continue to take the rest of their tax. They can probably do it the first year and take the whole 70% that's left if they choose, or whatever's left on their tax in the next tax year. They take the full balance in the next year instead of 30, 30, 30, 10. So I move to amend Senate Bill 189 FN, amendment number 426S. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Sen Murphy. Open for discussion.
Thank you. I'd like to not exec this bill today. We asked DRA to get us information on the number of filers that would be subject to this new provision and what the experience in other states had been. I think we can make better decisions if we have better data. I honestly don't feel I have enough information to vote one way or another, and we're not up against a deadline for 3 more working weeks. So could we please hold this bill and the next one?
Well, so right now we have a motion on the amendment. Right now we have a motion on the amendment. We haven't made a motion on the bill itself. It's just strictly to update the bill with the new language. And then the bill itself as amended will be on the discussion for further discussion and amendments. My inclination is to exec this bill. And my reasoning for it is, again, we know that over a net term of time, there is no net change to the state revenues. The amount of money a business pays in business profits tax is going to be identical, right? The only difference is that we're not going to have the carry forward. We're not going to do 30, 30, 30, 10. We're just let them take the 100% in the year. And so for that reason, I don't know what other income we need. We recognize that there'll be a net revenue loss in year 1, but year 2, now that deduction isn't there, so now they're going to pay their full business profits tax.
So there's no net reduction in tax revenue.
Correct.
Yes.
that may be the case, it may not be the case. I don't want to debate that issue. But when a senator has asked for more information, and that information will be forthcoming, there's no rush, there's no need to rush this bill through. If we can't wait for a senator to get information, why are we here? Why are we here? Why are we sitting here? We ask for information. that information is forthcoming. DRA is very willing to supply that information as best they can. Isn't that what it's all about? Isn't that why we have hearings?
It is, again, and I guess it's a question of opinion, right? So I think I have all the information I need to make a legitimate determination on this bill. Understanding, again, Senator, you served in Ways and Means, many of us have been in the Senate and the House. Everyone here has at least served in the House or the Senate in multiple terms, and we have the information necessary. I don't know that I need any more information. I understand the tax implication, having served 3 terms in the Ways and Means in the House and now chair of here. I understand the tax implication of this bill, so I don't know that a delay in information gathers us anything new.
Well, I guess I feel like we should be afforded the opportunity to get the information that's not going to take DRA forever. I mean, I sort of feel like I'm going to probably have to vote no because I don't have the information, whereas maybe we'd be coming out of here next week with unanimous recommendation. I honestly, I don't understand why we have to rush when we're not up against a deadline. I mean, obviously, it's your decision as chairman, but I don't understand it.
So the motion now is strictly on the amendment, to adopt the amendment, to update the bill language to a more current version that deals with DRA's objections or issues that they had. It corrects the orphaned taxpayers that would be subject to where they thought they were going to get a deduction, they don't get it, and it allows them to continue their deduction. So again, this just clears up, again, the specific instance of what DRA had for a problem, and the motion on it is to adopt this amendment right now. So, any further discussion on the amendment?
So this is a vote on the amendment.
On the amendment alone, right, to update the language, and then once the language has been adopted, we can talk about whether we want an OTPA motion or
Okay.
if we want to hold for more information based
All right.
on the current language.
Got it.
So, motion on the floor is to adopt amendment number 426S on Senate Bill 189. Any further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it on a 5-0 vote, and the amendment is adopted. Is there a motion on Senate Bill 89?
I move that we hold the bill until our next meeting and until the senator from Nashua receives the information that she's requested. I think that's a common courtesy that's been extended in all of my time as a member of the Senate and as a member of the legislature. If we can't offer to our colleagues the common courtesy of letting them get answers to questions, it just seems to be we've kind of eliminated the reason for this process. And that's awful. We want a collegial situation. You've been very collegial and very helpful, and I appreciate that. But indeed, we owe every senator the right to get an answer to a question. We owe that. It's an obligation. We took an oath of office that we would do our best for our constituents and for the state. And certainly, I believe that's what the senator is asking for. And to repudiate that, I think sets a very bad precedent.
So let me ask the members before we take actual motion. Would everybody okay if we set a deadline for next week? We'll schedule a meeting for next Wednesday and know that we are going to take executive action on both these bills.
I may not be here.
You may not make it.
I anticipated we'd get through today. But
We have the following Wednesday, and we still are not up.
So is it a Wednesday issue?
if it's brief, I can do it.
If it's what?
Brief. If we're
Well, I anticipate we're only going to have 2 bills, so I
here
anticipate it'll be no more than an hour in the morning. No,
I'll do my best. I can't promise sitting here now.
Would Wednesday be any better, or Tuesday?
Was there another day?
Tuesday would be better.
Tuesday would be better. Would that conflict with you guys? Do you have?
Oh, I'm free Tuesday mornings.
I'm free Tuesday morning.
All right, so let me talk.
Make myself.
Let me talk to the Senate President. Are you free Tuesday morning?
I'm in election law, but I'm usually done by 10:30.
It probably won't be that long,
Right, I don't anticipate it'll be more than an hour to
It
executive
might be
bill,
15
so-
minutes.
Right, it might be, we might all
Our
love
aide is
the
frantically
answers.
waving to get her attention.
But I would greatly
Four
appreciate
committees
it.
that meet Tuesday mornings, utilizing all the rooms we have. There would be membership overlap. I don't think we can meet outside of our time block, at least not on a Tuesday morning.
Okay,
Okay. Tuesday afternoon?
okay.
What's
Again,
Well,
that's fine.
some of us are in
Membership.
All right,
See what you can
all
find.
right. So let me see what we can do. I'll find a date. That
Thank you. I
we can work it.
really appreciate that,
I will
Mr.
hold the
Chairman.
two bills, we'll hold the last two bills for exec.
Right.
But understand that next week, whatever timeline I find, we're going to meet and exec the two bills.
All right.
All right?
Great.
With that, I
Motion
move
to
we
adjourn.
move out of executive session.
Oh, yes.
Second. Has been moved and seconded to come out of executive session. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Ayes have it. We're out of executive session and our meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Election laws probably, 3 weeks.